I like to think we changed the narrative, and I think we did. I think we did.
BusinessJournalDaily.com 3 Minutes With is brought to you by Farmers National Bank.
Save, borrow, and invest with Farmers. Take heart knowing you're helping create a strong community. Mind your money at Farmers. Talk directly to local decision makers about your loans, investments, and insurance. Farmers. Fiercely local, fiercely loyal.
Well, I studied political science in college, and I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And then I thought, I don't want to do more schooling. So I took some broadcasting courses because I'd done a lot of plays and things like that all through school. And women were just starting to come up. So I took some broadcasting courses, and I thought, well, this would be nice. I applied to every TV station in Pennsylvania for a job and heard from none of them. So I had to get my secretarial skills. And I became a secretary at KDKA TV in Pittsburgh. It took me a while to get in there, and I had to learn speed writing and typing, and I was the secretary to the general sales manager. And I learned a lot about sales there. And of course, I loved being at KDKA. It was so cool. And yeah, I was young and fresh out of college. And so one day a job opening came for the Marie Torrey show, a talk show in Pittsburgh. She was kind of legendary, and it was for an associate producer's job. And I applied because they wanted to have applicants from inside. I applied, and the program director said, "What do you want to be doing in 5 years?" I said, "Well, I'd like to be on the air." And he said, "Well, you can't have this job." So I said, "Oh, okay." He said, "But we'll teach you how to be on the air." And so they did. And at lunchtime, I would go downstairs and read in front of the camera. The night before, I would take the newspaper and write my own script, and I would practice being an anchor woman. And then one day, one of the sales guys said, "Hey, I came from Youngstown, and they're looking to hire a woman. They have to hire a woman. It's affirmative action. You should apply." So I went up to Youngstown and took a demo test in front of the camera, and I was hired.
So that was your first stint in broadcasting
At
as
Channel
an anchor?
33,
Channel
1974. And why was I into it? Watergate, Nixon, the whole number there. I mean, I was of that generation where I wanted to be the next great Woodward and Bernstein.
Yeah, so the Woodstein generation and the big race to be the next big journalist that there. I mean, it was a crowded field
cool.
back then.
It was really cool. And not like today.
Still
today
cool.
It can be a little scary to be a journalist, but it was cool then. It was cool. And people trusted journalists. They trusted the news.
Right.
There were only the 3 broadcast news stations on television, and it was a different time.
Right.
You know, the old Walter Cronkite stories. Different time.
So what in your broadcasting career stands out? I mean, it was not only an interesting time in national affairs, but local affairs, Youngstown, Ohio. I mean, you couldn't really pick a more interesting market, I think, during that period.
Well, I didn't stay in Youngstown for very long. I was only here for a couple of years, and then I actually was fired by Channel 33, and I went out to South Bend,
Right.
Indiana, worked out there for 3 years, was fired there, came back home to Pittsburgh, worked in Pittsburgh, and one of the news directors that hired me in South Bend called me up and said, "There's a job in Youngstown at Channel 33. I said, "Well, they fired me. They're not going to want me back. Ask them if they will, and if they will, well, maybe I'll come back." In 1979, when I came back to Youngstown, to Channel 33, they were killing each other. The mob factions were fighting. And so it got right in the middle of that, of the Pittsburgh and Cleveland factions and all the bodies that started turning up and going through all of that mob history and the mob background and the killings when the Naples and Carabia families were dividing the turf. At the same time, the steel mills were emptying out, and they were losing their markets. And the Carabia family was crippled by its leader being imprisoned and so forth and so on. And I got really into that, big time into that. And kind of still am, to be honest with you. It was very interesting times. But that was then, and that was in the early 80s. But it all changed. It all changed because eventually the demise of the steel mills had taken all of its toll. You know what I mean? And it was like, it changed. And I was bored too. I was very bored with journalism. Not so much journalism, but anchoring the news. It was boring for me. That wasn't me. Never was.
Right. So you said things were changing, certainly in the mid-'80s. And mob factions were slowly disintegrating, or at least losing their power and leverage. Hence is born an opportunity out of that. And that became the Business Journal. And the reasoning behind that, of course, was...
It had nothing to do with the mob.
Oh, no, I know that.
It had nothing to do with the mob.
Business
The
and
whole
opportunity.
idea behind the Business Journal was that everything was doom and gloom. There was nothing, no good news, no good business news. And at the same time, business journals were starting to pop up in cities across the country, standalone business publications. So the idea was to tell about positive business news in the Mahoning Valley. And that wasn't easy. That was not easy. In the very beginning, it was kind of like the age of the charlatans, so to speak, for the Business Journal. All the big promises, all the you know, the blimp factory, Avanti, the Metroplex, that was going to be the savior of the business community. There were a lot of stories about people who ripped off their businesses. I was looking through the folders in the storage room the other day, back when we had paper folders, and some of the stories I did, companies that were looted by people who came in and bought them and took all the assets and left, fired the people, and not just Farmore. Farmore, for a long time, was a good news story, and we were all excited about Farmore. Yeah. In fact, we went to the 300th store opening in Ashtabula, and that was a big deal. And then boom, that was on a Friday. The following Monday, Monis was fired. And it was like, what? And it just started to come out that it was a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, piece by piece, that thing started to
And that hurt the
unravel.
community a lot, because we had a basketball team, Youngstown Pride, owned by Farmore. I mean, it hurt the community. And Farmore had invested a lot of money in the Strauss building. The Strauss building was a cool place. People gathered at the bar there. It was good.
But small business, though, was...
We focused on small business.
Yeah, and small business was one of those stories that, well, that it wasn't told certainly enough at the time, and you couldn't...
Well, that's very true, Danny. Where we found good news was with small businesses that were adding 1, 2, 3, 4 jobs, and that were committed to the community, locally owned, mostly family owned, that wanted to stay here, that wanted to build. And concurrent to all of this, you know, you've got a change in the political dynamic as well. When the FBI came in and basically took the judges and prosecutors and sheriffs away on buses, basically. They loaded them all up, couple county commissioners, county engineer, and took them away. And there was some good government for a while. There was. And so you had government trying to do things.
If you look back in the late 80s and early 90s, the redevelopment of the industrial parks, or the development of the industrial parks.
Yeah, that's the Ungaro era. The Ungaro era, which in of itself is curious because it came from a disputed election. And but there was good government. There was good government. They built the industrial parks, they gave free land. I remember the interest subsidy program when interest rates were like 13, 14% for companies to borrow. So the city would buy down the interest rates give the companies enough money so that they were borrowing bank money at 5-6%, and it was affordable to expand. Some of those companies are here today and are still growing. An example is Valley Foods. That was an interest subsidy company that's really gone great guns. Some of the other ones have disappeared.
So as you look back on the formation of the business journal, what's the impact overall that you think that could be crystallized in some way?
Well, I like to think that we changed the narrative. I really like to think we changed the narrative, that we talked about what's going well, people who are investing. One of our big editorial focuses was on the balkanization of the Mahoning Valley, and we were constantly preaching consolidation, joint efforts, no more Girard versus Youngstown and Youngstown versus Niles, to work together, that we're a unit. We were a 5-county publication, Lawrence and Mercer County, as well as Columbiana, Trumbull, and Mahoning, and we felt that we were strong as a unit, and we kept preaching that. I like to think we changed the narrative, and I think we did. I think we did. I think that we talked to business people about how our strength was in our business community. It wasn't in our political leadership. It was in our business community, and we see that today. It's the business community that brought together the Lake to River region, the 4-county region. It's the business community that merged the chambers, that put together the Western Reserve Port Authority and the way things are working. Businesses led that. Our business leadership led that. And that's our core. In 1984, there was an internet, but I didn't know about it, and most people didn't know about it, and I think maybe just the military knew about it. I'm not sure, and maybe some scientists, but it wasn't until about 1990 that we actually started publishing some things online. And to that, I credit our retired managing editor, Monty Ryan, who really pushed us in that direction. And it was so rudimentary at the time, and it was weird. I mean, it was like, oh, okay, well, I guess we have to do that. And suddenly we were sending our stories to each other over phone lines and having these weird sounds as we would send a story. I always believed, and I still believe, that people will always want local news, local business news. And it's our job to figure out, how do we deliver it to them? And that's a constant challenge. I mean, we went from print to just baby steps online to now our digital circulation is nearly 3 times our print circulation in terms of paid circulation. And our stories can go all over the world. And I don't know what's next. I have no idea what's next. Podcasts, okay, we're starting to do podcasts. We're trying to stay ahead of the curve, but the curve, who knows what the curve is? I have no grip on that.
Yeah. Well, journalism in general has changed since you got on board in the 70s, certainly. So,
well, journalism has been under attack. It's been under attack. You know, I think a lot about that too. And I remember when CNN started, and a woman who, when I was anchoring the news in South Bend, Indiana, she anchored on the competitive station. And she ended up being one of the first anchors on CNN. And I can remember the beginning of CNN, and as everything proliferated, and all these channels came into being with cable, and now with all of the ability for anybody to hook up a podcast and become a journalist, or so they say. Anybody can report on anything. They can say anything they want to and put it out there, and it can go all over the world, and you can gain a following. It's crazy stuff. And it's not going to go back to the way it was. And I do worry about people not knowing when a fact is a fact. I really worry about that. that there is no agreement on facts, that there is so much propaganda. And somebody could say, yeah, but it's on the left, or yeah, it's MSNBC, or it's Fox News. It's everywhere. And all these channels, all these podcasts, all these people that just can go on and say whatever they want to, it's changed the whole dynamic of the country and of journalism. I hear it from young people all the time. They don't trust us. They don't trust us. They think it's all about ratings and stimulating and this and that. And they make good points. So I do worry about that a lot.
Talk about, the development of this company, the development of the business journal to what it is today.
Well, it's hard for me to talk about that, Danny, because it's been a lot of work. It's been a lot of work from day one, and probably more work than I ever dreamed of. And it was hard work. It was hard work. Yeah. But whenever the chips were down, a blessing came along. And, geez, I hate to sound like this, but the Business Journal would not have made it were it not for people like Dan O'Brien, George Nelson, Eileen Linton, all the people, Jan O'Malley, people have been with me almost from the start. You had to be in on the mission. The people who work here because they want to, they like what they're doing, they like telling these stories, and they're committed to the mission, which is building business and industry and quality of life. They want this area to grow and prosper. And so they stayed here and worked and built it.
In retirement now, and reflecting on all of this, and looking at the future of not only journalism, but also our mission here, maybe some thoughts on that, some words on where you're headed, and what you want to busy yourself with. I know the news will never leave you.
Well, I call in stories.
I know.
No, I'll always be a news hound. I'll always have people calling me, did you know this? And I'll see something and say, ooh, man, we should go after this, or we should localize it or find out what's happening. And that's the fun part of journalism. I mean, journalism is a blast. It can really be a blast. So in retirement, in my first week of retirement, I find that it is really curious that I am able just to relax and not think, oh, I better go check my email to see what's going on. I better go check this story, see this, see that, this and that. And that's not easy to just stop, but it's kind of cool. It's kind of fun.
Right.
It's kind of fun.
Uh-huh.
And I realize how tired I am. I'm exhausted. I truly am. And it was time to go. It is time to go. And the next generation is in place. The next generation is strong. Danny, you're part of the next generation. Michael Moliterno, Eileen Linton, Maggie Young, Jan O'Malley. We got this. And when I sold the paper to Sapentia Ventures, Chuck George, Wiley Rundenstrand, and Michael Martoff, I truly believe that it was blessed, because they care about the community. They didn't buy this newspaper because they're going to become millionaires. They bought it the same reason why we work so hard in this newspaper. They bought it for business and industry and quality of life in this community.
Much along the same lines as some of the original investors.
Exactly. The original investors were the same. Clarence Smith, Arnold Collins, and my father helped me. They wanted a different narrative. They wanted to invest in good business news stories to build up the confidence of the business community. And this next generation of ownership is the same way. They are investing in the community, and that will keep it going. I don't know how we will deliver the news long term. I don't know. Do we reduce the amount of print editions? Do we go to a magazine? Do we do this? What do we do? How do we add content online, on social media? What will social media be in 10 years? Who knows? Will we be like doing virtual reality? I have no grip on this, but I'm glad I don't have to figure it out. That's up to the next generation to figure that out. How do we deliver the news? And the important thing, it wasn't just the investors, it's the employees that made the difference here. I really want to stress that. It's not about me. Yeah. Never was. As we tried to change the narrative, and as we invested our time and effort to build up the business community, that was reciprocated by our business community, by all the locally owned companies that supported us with their advertising. And oftentimes it was just to support us. It wasn't necessarily that they would sell their products through us. Granted, we were a business-to-business publication, and so if you were selling cell phones or office equipment, it made sense to advertise with us. But a lot of people advertised with us just because they believed in us, and they wanted us to change the narrative. You know, they too, these businesses were confronted with the extremely negative perception the community had of itself, that it was all doom and gloom, that there was no future, that it was emptying out. And so anybody that was trying to say, hey, wait a minute, let's talk about what's good, what's going on here that's working, and people who are investing, they got behind us. And to this day, they get behind us. And that's why we succeeded. That's a big part of why we succeeded, along with our staff.
BusinessJournalDaily.com 3 Minutes With is brought to you by Farmers National Bank.
Save, borrow, and invest with Farmers. Take heart knowing you're helping create a strong community. Mind your money at Farmers. Talk directly to local decision makers about your loans, investments, and insurance. Farmers. Fiercely local, fiercely loyal.